Hello and welcome once again to Pure Experiences live streams. This is a series where we are reading the Mandukya by Gaudapada, Guru of Shankaracharya. We had already finished 2 chapters, which is a big achievement of some kind. So let's see what else is there in this book. It's a very interesting book. So this is the Advaita Prakarana, which means the chapter about non-duality. The Jeev, betaking itself to devotion, thinks itself to be related to Brahman, that is supposed to have manifested himself. He is said to be of narrow intellect, because he thinks that before creation was all of the nature of the unborn. While determining the meaning of Om, it has been stated in the form of proposition that Atman is the negation of phenomena, blissful and non-dual. It has been further stated that duality does not exist when the reality is known. Further, in the chapter on illusion, that duality does not exist really has been established by the illustrations of dream, magic, castle in the air, etc., and also by reasoning on the grounds of the capability of being seen and being infinite. Now it is asked whether non-duality can be established only by scriptural evidence, or whether it can be proved by reasoning as well. It is said in reply that it is possible to establish non-duality by reasoning as well. How is it possible? And this is shown in the chapter on Advaita. It has been determined that the entire realm of dualism, including the object and the act of devotion, is illusory, and the attributeless alone is the reality. The word upasanashrita in the text, meaning the one betaking himself to devotion, signifies him who has recourse to devotional exercises as a means to attainment of liberation, and who further thinks that he is the devotee and Brahman is his object of worship. This Jiva, or the embodied being, further thinks that through devotional practices, he at present related to the Brahman, personal God, would attain to the ultimate Brahman, to the dissolution of the body. Prior to the manifestation, according to this Jiva, everything including him itself was unborn. In other words, he thinks, I shall through devotional practices regain that which was my real nature before manifestation, though I persist in the Brahman that appears in the form of the manifold. Such a Jeev, that is, the aspirant, betaking itself to devotion, inasmuch as it knows only a partial aspect of Brahman, is called of narrow or poor intellect by those who regard Brahman as eternal and unchanging. In the Upanishad of the Talvakara Cain supports this view in such statements as that which is not expressed by speech and by which speech is expressed, that alone known as Brahman, and not that which people here adore. So a quick review here shows that this chapter is going to establish Advaita via reasoning as well, because probably in the preceding chapters it was only mention of scriptures. It was established on the basis of the scriptures, which is the Vedic text and Upanishads. So it will be interesting to see how this is done here by Gaudapada. And he is again saying that people who simply worship things in the air, in the sky, they are called of poor intellect or a narrow intellect, because they do what is really mentioned in the scriptures, what really the Guru is saying, and they erect temples or make idols and keep worshipping them in hopes that they will achieve a status of Brahman someday, because that is what they know. For their whole life they were born in slavery of some kind. They were dependent on rich people, powerful people for their food and for their lives, and they know only to bow down to somebody of a higher rank, and then they do something similar to the Brahman or the ultimate reality, or when they are promised liberation. So they look for somebody who can give them the liberation. This is the miserable condition of ignorant people. Even if you tell them that you are the Brahman, well, nothing changes. So this was the condition when this text was written. It is still there, but more and more people are coming out of this superstitious kind of existence, and there is, a side effect that now the Advaita kind of philosophy has become playground of highly intellectual people instead of ordinary people. Ordinary people do not benefit from it a lot, because it requires intense study. It requires intense amount of understanding and intellectual capabilities of rationality and logic, and also freedom from blind beliefs and conditioning and indoctrination. So you can see very few people are able to take advantage of this philosophy and achieve the state of oneness or of samadhi or Brahman or liberation. They are all same. So even he is giving an example of the Cain Upanishad, where something similar is stated, that the people here adore something else. I am not talking about that Brahman. Whatever the people here are worshipping, I am not talking about that. And if it is mentioned in the Upanishad, then it must be even more older. You can even, a few thousand years to it. Even much before Gaudapada, this was the condition. So nothing has really changed, actually. Nothing has really changed. as far as transfusion of the teachings of Vedanta is concerned, it looks like it is the same situation since many thousand years. So hopefully the new age, the age of information and education and free and minds who are now largely free from religious and political garbage, more and more people are coming out of these things. So more people, it is possible that more people will benefit from these philosophies which reached their peak even before the current cycle. So Anandgiri is saying about the reasoning that you don't need to depend totally on the Shruti. You can arrive at the truth of the Advaita by one's own experience and reasoning. So he has a commentary on the Jiva who is trapped in the illusion. That he thinks that he has fallen. He needs to get up and progress towards a personal God, worships a personal God or some kind of cosmic soul. And he cannot think of the non-dual self. No amount of persuasion will modify their beliefs, and he imagines the Sagun Brahman, which is the Maya, to be reality. This ignorant Jeev thinks that only after their death he will realize his eternal Brahmic nature, which was his real nature before he came into dual existence. So this is again one more common superstition that I will become one with the universe only after death. Right now I am separate. It is because an ignorant person has no idea of the changeless non-dual self. For according to his view, the non-dual self is also limited by time and change which characterize the dual universe. According to the knower of truth, Brahman never undergoes any manifestation. The phenomena of birth and death are mere illusion. So what happens is people do not bother to take a look at their blind beliefs before sticking to them. And because they have this blind belief that is going on since many ages, as you can very well guess, the whole society is in the claws of blind beliefs. So because everybody thinks in the same way, people generally adopt the sheepish behavior. They do not bother to stop and check what they are believing. They associate their existence with the body, which means the truth must be somewhere else, not here. Before birth, after death, in the sky somewhere, will be given by some big entity. If I do something good, if I don't do something good, I will not get it. These worldly beliefs are then projected on that which is your birthright, that which you already are. So, and there is a big hierarchy of blind beliefs, and that makes the job of a guru very difficult. It is not that there will be people who will quickly grasp it. No, everybody has some kind of blind beliefs. Even those with very high intellect, those who are very, very educated, even them, they suffer from blind beliefs. Their education becomes their belief then. Their pride, their hubris that I am intelligent, that becomes their belief. That becomes their pitfall. Number 2. Therefore, I shall now describe that Brahman which is free from limitations, unborn, and which is the same throughout. And from this, one understands that it is not in reality born, though it appears to be manifested everywhere. So Shankara is saying here, when unable to realize Atman, which is both within and without and birthless, and therefore believing oneself to be helpless through avidya, thinks I am born, I subsist in Brahman with attributes, and through devotion to it I shall become Brahman. And thus Kripana, narrow-minded. Therefore I shall describe Brahman which has never been subject to any limitations and which is birthless. The narrowness of mind has been described in such Shruti passages as when one sees another, hears another, knows another, then there is limitedness, littleness, mortality and unreality. Modification is only a name arising from speech, but the truth is that all is clay. But contrary to it is Brahman known as Bhuma, within and without, and which is free from all limitations. I shall now describe that Brahman, free from all limitations, by real which one gets rid of all narrowness, superimposed by ignorance. It is called ajati, birthless, inasmuch as none knows its birth or cause. It is the same always and everywhere. How is it so? It is so because there does not exist in it any inequality caused by the presence of parts or limbs. For only that which is with parts may be said to be born, or to have taken new form by the change of its parts. But as Atman is without parts, it is always the same and even, that is to say, it does not manifest itself in any new form through a change of the parts. Therefore, it is without birth and free from limitation. Now listen as to how Brahman is not born, how it does not undergo change by so much as a jot, but ever remains unborn, though it appears through ignorance to be born and to give birth to others, like the rope and the snake. Oh, Brahman. So Shankar is giving us some hints why Brahman is birthless. It is because the secret lies in this meaning of this word, born. What do you mean by born? How is anything born? So usually it is assembled out of tiny parts. When something is born, something is created, it is assembled out of something else. I mean, nothing gets created from nothing. It is always a process of transformation, that which we call birth. It is a process of either change or accumulation and assembly. Then it is said to be born. Probably Gaudapada is going to give us more detail on this, but Shankar has already hinted about this thing. If there are parts, you can say that, they can be assembled into something. But as Atman is without parts, which is our direct experience, the experiencer looks like simply a conscious light, a very pure, without any attributes, without any parts. It looks like emptiness, like void. Void. So, and we cannot find any part there. Is it possible to disassemble the Atman? If it is possible, then we should find parts. We should find constituents there. But no, that is not seen. Cannot even conceive of, cannot even imagine there will be parts there. Yes, the experiences have parts. For example, the body is made up of parts, and we can see that it is assembled out of food, oxygen and water and so on. Not the consciousness. And he is again pointing at the narrowness of intellect. When one sees another, hears another, knows another, then there is limitedness, mortality and unreality. What people do is they see themselves and they see others. And since the other looks like a mortal and looks like himself, usual with free will, they also assume themselves with, and they also project the same personhood on their own self. It is only a name arising from speech, but the truth is that all is clay. So this modification or naming, which is a mental activity, separation and projection of limitedness on by identity with a form which is limited, it is ignorance. It is not seen that the form is made up of a substrate, for example the clay. It is not seen that the pot is made up of the clay. The pot is taken as reality. The clay is ignored. This is very natural because as soon as we are born, we see the pots around us, which means the other people. And since they also believe that they are pots, we also believe that I am one of the pot. It is assembled one day, and so on. This is called avidya or ignorance. Verse 3, chapter 3. Atman may be said to be similar to Akash or ether, manifested in the forms of the Jeev, which is embodied self, which may be compared to the ether enclosed in pots. Again, as pots are said to be produced from the ether, similarly, bodies are said to be evolved from the Atman. This is the illustration of manifestation. So let us see what Shankara has to say about this. It has been said in the previous text, I shall now describe Brahman, birthless and free from all narrowness. Now I shall give an illustration and a reason to substantiate the proposition. As the Supreme Atman is like the Akash, subtle, without parts and all pervasive, It is compared to Akash. The Supreme Self, again, who is likened to be to the Akash, is said to be manifested as the embodied beings or Kshetrajnas, knowers of bodies, and are likened to the Ghatakash or the Akash enclosed in jars. This is the Supreme Self, which is like the Akash. Or the sentence may be explained thus: as the totality of the Akash enclosed within the pot is said to constitute what is known as the Mahakash, or the great expanse of ether, and similarly, the totality of the embodied beings constitute the Supreme Being. The creation or manifestation of the Jiva from the Supreme Self, as stated in the Vedanta, is like the creation or manifestation of the Ghatakash, which is the ether enclosed in the jar, from the Mahakash, or the great and undifferentiated ether. That is to say, creation or manifestation is not real. As from the Akash are produced such physical objects as the pot, similarly from the Supreme Self, which is like the Akash, are produced the entire aggregate of material entities, such as the earth, etc., as well as individual bodies. All are characterized by causality, the entire production being nothing but mere imagination, like that of the snake in the rope. Therefore, it is said, the aggregates of the gross body, like the pot, etc. When the Shruti, with a view to the enlightenment of the ignorant, speaks of the creation or manifestation of the Jiva from the Atman, then such manifestation, being admitted as a fact, is explained with the help of the illustration of the creation of the pot from the Akash. So it is a kind of very convoluted metaphor there of the ether and the pot. Probably we'll get more clues from Anandgiri here. So he says, as the Akash does not really create the Akash enclosed within the pot, but appears as enclosed on account of the association of the upadhis of the pot. Similarly, the Supreme Self does not manifest or create any Jeev, but appears as Jeev on account of its association with the upadhis of ignorance. And this is an explanation of creation from the empirical standpoint, when such creation is admitted as a fact. But from the standpoint of reality, there is no creation. So, what Gaudapada is saying here, if you talk about creation, then it looks like this, that the ether is getting divided into many separate compartments called Jiva. But if you ask me, this is not really happening. So the empirical standpoint is, you see, it is like a division of the space, but really nothing is getting created from the space. The space is space. If it is enclosed in something, some imaginary thing, then also it is space. And it did not turn into a pot. So this metaphor is very, very convoluted, I think, but I think nothing to worry, because this will be explained a lot. He says, the pot cannot be produced without space. They exist in space. Similarly, no physical body can exist without the substratum of Atman. Therefore, Atman is said to have created the physical bodies. So now we must be very careful, do not try to think the Atman as space, which many people do. They think that the Atman is something which looks like a void, empty space, blackness, where there is nothing, and something is created out of that nothing. So that is a misunderstanding of the metaphor of the space. The Atman is not even space. The Atman is not seen, never seen, cannot be imagined. So you see, when talking about the creation, you can say sometimes from the empirical standpoint that Atman must have created the physical bodies. But given the unreality of the physical bodies, it is not really true. So he also goes on to say that Vedanta accepts both the theories of Vivarta and Parinam as the explanation of the phenomenal universe. Brahman is imagined to manifest himself as the universe through Maya, and then the universe follows the law of causation. So this, you see, once you get into the Maya, then all theories will emerge. All kinds of theories are there, and there are so many. Creation through Maya is only an explanation of the universe when one takes it to be real. It is not truth. Maya is only a statement of fact, an explanation of the world we perceive in a state of ignorance. From the standpoint of reality, neither the universe nor Maya exists. Brahman alone exists. So, when you are looking at the snake in the rope, you can come up with various theories about how did the snake came there? How did it happen that the snake is appearing in the rope? But even with a very very sophisticated theory, it cannot be concluded that the snake is actually there. You cannot conclude that, even if your theory is very very pretty. That has already happened with many people, because the theories, they apply so beautifully to the illusion, they are taken as truth. This is a fallacy. Number 4. As on the destruction of the pot, the ether enclosed in the pot merges in the Akash, the great expanse of ether. Similarly, the Jiva, the merge in the Atman. So that which looked like arising out of the substratum, it goes back into the substratum. That is all happens. So the Ghatakash becomes the Akash, just as it became the Ghatakash. So creation is followed by destruction, and the destruction is followed by creation, and it is never ending cycle. So Shankar is also saying the merging of the Jiva in the Supreme Self follows in the wake of destruction of the aggregate of the body, etc. The meaning is that neither the creation nor destruction in itself is in itself real from the standpoint of the absolute. And Anandgiri says, both the creation and destruction of the universe and consequently its existence are due to ignorance. In truth, there is neither creation, nor existence, nor destruction. Destruction is impossible in the absence of creation. Thus, the Shruti passages describing the process of creation and destruction do not antagonize the reality of the non-dual Atman. As such fact is admitted by the Advaitin to be possible in the realm of ignorance. So when we step down one step into the ignorance, and then we are willing to admit that okay, let us find out what happened, how the creation happened and all, then various possibilities can be imagined. But that we should keep this in the back of our minds, that it is theoretical subject now. And the Shruti also has described this processes of creations and destructions, but they are from point of view of the ignorance. Number 5. As any portion of Akash enclosed in a pot being soiled by dust, smoke, etc., all such other portions of Akash and enclosed in other pots are not soiled. So is the happiness of the Jeev, that is the happiness misery of one Jeev, do not affect other Jivas. So let me see here, there are some objections coming up now. And that is very, very clear that if one illusory structure called the Jiva is structured in a specific way, it does not mean that the whole Brahman is structured in that way. If one pot is soiled, it does not make other pots in similar way. So Shankar is saying the dualists contend that if one Atman exists in all bodies, then the birth, death, happiness, etc. of one Atman as Jeev must affect all, and further there must follow a confusion regarding the results of the action done by individuals. This contention is thus refuted as the Akash, enclosed within one jar, being soiled by dust, smoke, does not make the Akash, enclosed in other jars, soiled with the dust and smoke. So all created beings are not affected by the happiness of one Jiva. So there is this belief now that comes because there are separate pots, there must be separate spaces also. And if you are claiming that there is only one space, then how come one attributes of one jar do not affect everything else? So Gaudapada or Shankar are giving the same metaphor here. The space is same, but the jars are now different. And because they assume themselves to be different, there will be different attributes that get collected there, and they do not affect the whole space. So, objection. Is it your contention that there is only one Atman? Reply. Yes, we admit it. Have you not heard that there is only one Atman, like the all-pervading space in all bodies? Objection. If there be only one Atman, then it must always and everywhere feel misery and happiness. That feels very, very natural, isn't it? Why I am not knowing whatever is going on in the minds of other people? Why I don't know what is going on on the other side of the world? if I'm the one who is perceiving everything, this is very frequently asked question. So I should feel the misery and happiness of every other jeev if I am only one. And let us see what is the reply here. This objection cannot be raised by the Sankhyas. For the Sankhyas do not admit that misery, happiness ever cling to the Atman. For they assert that happiness, misery belong inseparably to Buddhi. Further, there is no evidence for imagining multiplicity of Atman, which is of the very nature of knowledge. So he is saying that this objection is being raised by the Sankhyas, and technically they should not say it, because they themselves say that it is the buddhi or the intellect or the mind for our purposes. The suffering and the happiness, they are states of the mind, not Atman. So how can, which is illusory happening, isn't it? So how come you are saying that the illusory happening is affecting the whole, which is non-illusory? So he is beating them with their own stick. And he says, and furthermore, there is no evidence for multiplicity of Atman. Yes, there are forms, the imaginary forms are multiple, but there is no evidence for the multiplicity of the substratum out of which the forms are arising. So, for example, the rope and the snake, there can be many creatures that you can imagine in the rope. There can be snake, there can be earth form, there can be lizard, there can be dragon, whatever you want. But that does not imply that there are multiple ropes. Similarly, another example, that the gold can be formed into many ornaments. That does not mean that every ornament has a specific kind of gold. The gold is same. The gold remains the gold. It is only one gold. Similarly, many pots, they are formed in the space, does not make the space many. The space is one. The pots are many, and whatever goes on in the pots is their own business, not of the space. So we can actually argue like this. Let us see what happens here. Objection. In the absence of the multiplicity of Atman, the theory that the Pradhan or Prakriti acts for the sake of others does not hold good. So another objection here, and replies, no, this argument is not valid for whatever the Pradhan or Prakriti may be supposed to accomplish by itself or another cannot inseparably inhere in Atman. If bondage and liberation accomplished by the Pradhan inseparably inhered in the multiple Purushas, then the theory that the Pradhan always acts for the sake of others would not be consistent with the unity of Atman existing everywhere. And theory of the Sankhyas regarding the multiplicity of Atman would be reasonable. But the Sankhya's do not admit that the purpose of bondage or liberation can ever be inseparably associated with the Purush. For they admit that the Purush are attributeless and are centers of pure consciousness. Therefore, the very existence of the Purush is their support for the theory that the action of Pradhan is directed to serve the purpose of others, the Purush. But the supposition of the multiplicity of Purush need not be made for this purpose. Therefore, the theory of the Pradhan seeking to serve the purpose of others cannot be an argument for the supposition of the multiplicity of Atman. The Sankhyas have no other argument in support of their supposition regarding the multiplicity of Atman. The Pradhan takes upon itself bondage and liberation only through the instrumentality of the existence of the other. The Purush, which is of the very nature of knowledge, is the cause of the activity of the Pradhan by the fact of its very existence and not on account of any specific qualities. So, it is through ignorance alone that people imagine the Purush or the Atman to be, and also thereby give up the real import of the Vedas. And the Vaisheshikas and others assert that attributes such as desire, etc., are inseparably related to Atman. This view is also not correct. For the samskar or the impressions, which are the cause of memory, cannot have any inseparable relation with the Atman, which has no parts. Further, if it is be contended that the origin of memory lies in the contact of Atman with the mind, we say that this contention is not valid. For in that case, there will be no principle regarding memory. Memory of all things will come simultaneously. Besides, mind can never be related to the Atman, which is devoid of all sensations and which belongs to a class other than that of the mind. Further, the Vaisheshikas do not admit the attributes such as forms, action, generality, particularity, and inherence can exist independently of the substance. If these are totally independent of one another, the contact between the Atman and desire, etc., and also between the attributes and the substance will be an absurdity. I'm not going to explain that. It is about the back and forth between Sankhya's and Vaisheshikas and Advaitins is not going to throw too much light on Advait. The essential, the bottom line here is that they always mistake the Atman as an experience. That is why all the objections arise. They think that the Atman has attributes, has qualities and so on, and because of that all the confusion arises. So on that there is a long commentary by Anandgiri. Although it will be very, very entertaining to go through the objections and replies, but that requires familiarity with the Sankhya and Vaisheshika philosophy or the Mimamsa philosophy. If anybody wants to take that trouble, then most welcome. Then it will make it worth reading. Otherwise, it's not, because we do not really know very accurately what these words like Pradhan and Prakriti and all they mean. Although there is a slight, we can explain them in one lines, but that's not going to make it that valuable, that argument will still remain misunderstood. So let us stick to Gaudapada, what he wants to say. That's what we want to know here. Number 6. And though form, function and name are different here and there, yet this does not imply any difference in the Akash, which is one. The same is the conclusion with regard to the Jeev. So this line is pretty clear. And there is a logical fact here that the forms and functions, etc., they do not say anything about the substratum. They are not related to the substratum. They are kind of independent of from where they are arising, and that from that which is witnessing these things. The second line is not so clear, so let me see what Shankar is saying. Shankar is busy in objections. So objection: if Atman be one, then how is it possible to justify the variety of experiences pointing to the multiplicity of Atman, which is explained as being due to avidya or ignorance? The reply: this is thus explained in our common experience with regard to this Akash, which is really one. We find variety of forms such as large, small. In respect of the Akash, enclosed in a pot, a water bowl and a cover. Similarly, there are various functions of the same Akash, such as fetching water, preserving water and sleeping. Lastly, there are various names as the ether enclosed in a jar, ghat, and the ether enclosed in a water bowl, karak, etc., caused by different upadhis. And all these different forms, functions and names are matters of common experience. This variety of experience caused by different forms is not true from the standpoint of the ultimate reality. For in reality, Akash never admits of any variety. Our empirical activities based upon the difference in Akash are not possible without the instrumentality of the adventitious upadhi. As in this illustration, the jivas, the embodied beings, which may be compared to the Akash enclosed in a jar, are regarded as different, this difference being caused by the upadhis. This is the conclusion of the wise. This text gives one of the explanations of the empirical world as stated by the wise. What is Anandgiri saying here? The contention of the opponent is this: the variety of names, forms and functions is an indubitable experience of the relative world. And this can be explained only if we admit the multiplicity of the Atman. Therefore, there are infinite number of Atmans, each having a different name and form. And each performing a different function. The unity of Atman cannot explain this variety. This is the objection. Why is there a variety when you are talking about only one space like existence? So there is this definition of upadhi, which is actually a title, a name only. The names points to the purpose and so on. The name points to the form. The apparent difference in our empirical experience is caused by upadhis which are unreal. These upadhis are unreal on account of their changeable and negatable nature. Therefore, from the standpoint of reality, Atman, like the Akash, is only one and without a second. This explanation that this apparent difference of the empirical experience is caused by avidya is given from the relative standpoint when such difference is admitted as a fact. But from the standpoint of the ultimate reality, the difference does not exist. So, assuming that there is a relative reality, then there is an explanation. And this is the key word here, that the upadhis are unreal on account of their changeable and negatable nature. The Atman does not take on the thoughts and preferences and likes, dislikes, emotions, and anything, the bodily features and all. Why? Why the Atman is not affected or does not take on these things? Because they are unreal. Why are they unreal? Because they are changeable. This was established in our past chapter number 2 on the illusion. Why do we call these things as illusory? Because they are seen and because they are changeable. So if you have missed that entire discussion on the illusions, how we have established the illusions by comparing them with dreams and so on, mind created stuff, and then you will see that because they are unreal, the Atman cannot be said to hold those upadhis, and therefore the variations in those upadhis does not imply variations in Atmans. There is only one. There is no variation. There is no multiplicity of them, of the Atmans. So the differences that we see in the forms, which are relative in nature, which are illusory in nature, is caused by, that is, the difference is caused by upadhis only, which are unreal. And the upadhis are names and forms which are mind created and changeable and negatable. So I think now this is clear that although the jivas are different, the Akash or the Atman is not. And the difference in the jiva is valid. You can only say they are different only if you admit of a relativistic existence, which is the point of view of ignorance only. Otherwise, no questions come up regarding the jiva. You declare them illusory, and then everything that remains is the substratum, which is that. Then no questions can be asked. But however, you can say that the empirical reality can be admitted for a while, because so many objections are there. And then you can try to negate, refute whatever tells you that the Atman has parts, or is dual, or is multiple, or so and so on. Number 7, as the Ghatakash, that is the ether proportioned off by the pot, is neither the evolved effect nor part of the Akash, so is the Jiv, the embodied being, neither the effect nor part of the Atman. Now, this is very important. Some people will say that the embodied being is a part of the whole. And he's saying, no, it is not like this. The whole has no parts. It cannot be even called whole, because the whole, WHOLE, somehow implies that there can be parts. So non-dual is the proper word, non-dual. Then there is no possibility of breaking it into anything. The shunyata has no parts. The zero has no parts. It does not exist as an object. It does not exist as an experience in time and space. And so there is no possibility that there are parts. And this is our direct observation also regarding the consciousness, which is my own nature. So that observation comes very, very naturally. And we do not see any such assembly or parts. We see it as void, is more nothing than the nothingness. Yes, and that belief is wrong, that the embodied being is a part of the whole. No, that's not true. The embodied being is not. There is more true. The embodied being does not exist, simply appears, and then you can slap on the attributes like, oh, it is part of the Atman, it is part of the Brahman, it is going to dissolve back into Atman. And just, Atman has taken this form. And Gaudapada is saying, no. It is all approximate talk. That is not the case. Sometimes this belief is formed by this metaphor of the gold and the ornaments also. That look, the gold became many when it was broken into parts and formed into many ornaments. But that is a misunderstanding of the metaphor. The gold is gold. It did not became many golds. So yes, that can happen if the metaphors are taken very, very literally. They are just pointing to something. So that is why the metaphor of Ghatakash and Akash has been chosen here, because that removes such misunderstanding. Shankar, with his objection, not his objection, somebody's objection, our experience of the variety of forms, functions, etc., associated with the ether enclosed in the pot, is true from the standpoint of the ultimate reality and not illusory, as you say. So he is, I don't know what he is saying, that our experience of the variety is true from the standpoint of the ultimate reality. Is he saying that? So I don't think so. Has anybody said this? So Shankar says, no, this cannot be so. For the ether enclosed in the pot cannot be the evolved effect of the real ether. In the same way as the ornament, etc., are the effect of gold, or the foam, bubble, moisture, etc., are the effect of water. Nor again is the Ghatakash, the Akash in the pot, similar to the branches and other parts of the tree. As Ghatakash is neither a part nor an evolved effect of the Akash. So also the Jeev, the embodied being compared to the Akash, enclosed in the pot, is neither, as in the illustrations given above, an effect nor part of the Atman, the ultimate reality, which may be compared to the Mahakash, that is the undifferentiated expanse of ether. Therefore, the relative experience based upon the multiplicity of Atman is an illusion from the standpoint of the ultimate reality. So something similar he is saying, People think that, just like the foam bubble, they evolve out of water and they merge back in the water as a devolution process. And that is not happening in case of the embodied beings, he says. Pot cannot be the evolved effect of the real ether, he says. The ether enclosed in the pot has not formed out of the surrounding space. There is no process there which created the enclosed space out of the outside space, the bigger space. It is only an assumption that the space within the pot is somehow different from the outside space. It is only a projection of our thought on that which is absolutely continuous with the space outside. Did it evolve out of the space outside? No. Was it assembled out of the space outside? No. Only projection, the upadhi was slapped on it. Look, now because of the pot it is different. So the care should be taken here not to think of the pot as equivalent to the embodied being or the jiv. The space in the pot is being compared with the embodied being or the jiv, not the structure made up of clay. That does not serve any purpose, I think, here. You can even imagine a pot which is not made up of clay, which is made up of nothing, in place of something which is made up of clay. And then you can see the metaphor clearly. So Anandgiri says, it is admitted by all that ether is without parts and cannot undergo any modification. So something similar, the Atman is even more subtle than the ether. Ether is the English translation for the element of Akash or space. We explain a necklace or foam as the modification of gold or water. We also explain the branches or leaves as the part of the tree. But Jiv is neither modification, nor manifestation, nor part of the Atman. Jiv is Atman itself, which never undergoes a change. Everyone should now think about this thing a lot. This is very important, because even many Advaita students have this kind of belief that I am a modification of the Brahman and I need to go there, I need to reach there. How will I become the Brahman? You cannot become the Brahman. That is the bad news. But the good news is you are already the Brahman. Just drop your belief. See through it. What tells you that you are not the Brahman? And usually I pose this kind of questions to the students. These questions were really helpful for me. And the question takes the form like this, that show me the two. Show me two Atmans. Show me two consciousnesses. And no, it will be impossible to do that. And then about the transformation of the Jiva into Brahman. Yes. That is very tricky. And then the question that I pose is, show me the separation. Show me that you are separate from the other multiple things that you think are existing out there apart from yourself. Show me the separation. Show me that you are separate and other things, whatever are being perceived, are separate. And that is also impossible. That also cannot be shown. So these two questions are very, very important actually. They solve the puzzle for me. So hopefully you will also benefit from asking these questions. Here they have so far Gaudapada has totally dependent on the metaphor of the Akash. He has not attempted to get a direct answer so far. So number 8. So I was checking the stream. Hopefully it's going through. Although it is a kind of odd time to talk about Advaita, but I could not get time today. I was busy in something else. So anyway, the internet is running smoothly because it's very late here. It's midnight. Number 8. As the ether appears to the ignorant children to be soiled by dirt, similarly the Atman also is regarded by the ignorant as soiled. So it is our ignorance that we think that the stuff that appears here is kind of affecting the Atman. The clouds that appear in the sky, they do not wet the sky. They do not do anything to the sky. And they go away. The sky remains the sky. So Shankar says, as the diversity of experiences such as forms, functions, is caused by admitted differences of the Ghatakash, so also is the experience of birth, death, consequent on the perception of the different jivas due to the limitations caused by avidya. Therefore, in the contamination of misery, action and result of action caused by avidya does not really inhere in the Atman. In order to establish this meaning by an illustration, the text says, as in our ordinary experience, it is found that the ignorant regard the Akash, which, to those who know the real nature of a thing by discrimination, is never soiled by any contamination, as soiled with cloud, dust, and smoke. So also the Supreme Atman, the knower, the innermost self, directly perceived within, is regarded by those who do not know the real nature of the innermost self as affected by the evils of misery, action, and result. But this is not the case with those who can discriminate. As in the desert are never found foam, waves, though thirsty creatures falsely attribute these things to it. Similarly, the Atman also is never affected by the turbidity of misery, falsely attributed to it by the ignorant. So the thought that I am miserable, I am suffering, I am sad, I am poor, I am something or other, these thoughts, they arise out of ignorance. And that is why knowing your true nature kills the suffering completely. It's gone forever. It will never come back. Once the Atman is seen as a totally spotless sky, then whatever happens on that background, happens not to me. Who knows to whom that happens, you see. We stop caring. Although that is not the whole story. But the misery is seen as non-existent. Not only the current miserable stuff and the whole of it. In the past, suffering is also gone because that also was clouds, you see. In the future, anything which may happen in the future is also gone. That is also the future storm, future cyclones, future clouds and dirt and smoke. So, because there is this realization, the fear is also dropped. No birth, no death, and these realizations, they do these things automatically. You see, the suffering is completely eliminated, and the fear is eliminated. Now the Jeev continues in the misery and fear and all. That's why I said that is not the whole story. Anandgiri says, the opponent may contend thus: the statement that Jeeves are neither an evolved effect nor a part of Brahman, but identical with it, is not correct. For Brahman is ever pure and non-dual, whereas the Jeeves are many and ever affected by the contamination of passion, attachment, etc. This text refutes this contention. Yes, it is a big achievement of the Vedanta philosophy that it can destroy the roots by roots, all the suffering and fear and attachment and whatever. And this is not a kind of brainwashing that look, it is like this. This is not a kind of blind belief that look, you are not suffering. It is not like this. Those who realize the true nature, they are truly freed from suffering. It is not a brainwashing or some kind of placebo treatment and to fool the mind that now you are not suffering, now you are okay. No, it is not like this. If you have fallen into this kind of trap of disidentification because there is too much suffering, then that is not the Advaita realization. That is another affliction on top of the afflictions. In our relative experience, we make a distinction between the different forms of Akash. Enclosed by a jar, an eye of the needle, or an extensive field, this knowledge of distinction caused by various upadhis, unreal from the standpoint of truth, makes us associate the undifferentiated Akash with different forms, functions, and names. In like manner, ignorant persons make a distinction of the Jeeves by associating the Atman with the attributes of different bodies, and consequently think of the Atman as suffering from the effects of birth, death, misery. This distinction in the non-dual Atman, which gives rise to the notion of birth, death, is due to avidya, which is subjective or which proceeds from the perceiver. This distinction does not in reality exist. Hence, Atman is ever contaminated by the evils of birth. Atman is ever uncontaminated by the evils of birth, death, etc. So, the trick is to realize that the experience does not affect the experiencer. This is the trick. You realize this, and this, whatever Gaudapada is saying, will be realized. So he says avidya is subjective, but the word subjective is not to be misunderstood here. The word subjective means personal. which proceeds from the perceiver. And now this is the problem in English, that there are two meanings of the subjective here: the subject and subjective. The ignorant, subject to the illusion of the mirage, associate the desert with foam. All waters of mirage taken as real by all the waters of mirage taken as real by the ignorant do not soak one grain of sand in the desert. And as this water is unreal, similarly all the evils, I was not paying attention to the chat here. I was not expecting anybody to show up at this time. So Leila is here and she is asking, is it possible to momentarily get involved in the illusion? Yes, why not? It is possible to get involved in the illusion for many lifetimes also. That is what ignorant people are doing. So if there is knowledge of the self, then sometimes the mind slips into ignorance because of the habitual nature. And that is why our practice says that remember who you are, remember all the time, 24/7. Prevent the slipping. But you see, when the mind slips into ignorance and gets involved in the illusion, which it will, because it's the nature of the mind, you see, what can you do about that? But after it comes out of it, which will happen because your conviction is very solid regarding the I am not an experience, I am not the mind, I am not the body. This conviction is very solid. So eventually it will come out as the situations become less loaded with very, very, say, toxic elements. And then you can see that whatever happened, the slipping that happened, or the wetting of the jeev, or the individual of by the rain of the misery, you can see it now that it is not real. It was not real. And in future also it will not be real. So it does not really matter, you see. Although our practice says that let's do it, let's not slip into ignorance again and again. But even if you do it, even if you slip, it has no real effect on Atman. In technical words, we say it fails to form any impression on the memory. Even though going through all these movements with full identification, when afterwards, when they are seen as not me, it was not the suffering, then this erases the effects on the memory. The impressions are not formed. And when there are no impressions formed, they do not reverb back, they do not echo back. This is the, you must have noticed, this is the nature of the mind. This is the mechanism in the mind that keeps recalling or remembering all those events again and again and again, and it produces the same suffering, a virtual suffering again and again, even though the event is over long ago, you see. It is a historic event now. But the mind has this ability, you can say, to revive it, to give it a new life, and then suffers again. So why is that? Because there are impressions. There are very, very strong impressions there. Because it happened in darkness. It happened in ignorance. So, and the knowledge then wipes it out. probably not the past one, but whatever is happening after the knowledge of the self, whatever happens after that, though those impressions are wiped out, and the mind will not produce replay of those sufferings, which is the only suffering that you see, isn't it? That is the only suffering. Let me give you another example. If a thorn is embedded in your thumb, then it is a suffering, isn't it? This is called the suffering in the instance, suffering in the moment. Can you do anything? No, nothing can be done. This is the mechanism in the body. It will produce pain. But when the thorn is removed, it is forgotten. Like a child, you go about your work, you see, nothing really happened there. But imagine if the same pain is recalled every minute. Even though the thorn is gone, the pain is still there. Now this is called suffering. This is real suffering. Not real. The word real is not good enough here. This is called the mental suffering, you can say. The actual suffering was in the moment. Nothing can be done about it. But now the repetition of the event, which is because of the impressions in the memory, that constitutes the majority of human suffering. That cannot, that is a result of the ignorance, identification with the momentary suffering. So because of the awareness, because of this knowledge of my real nature, this memory will be wiped out, or it will be seen as, oh, not me. And then the suffering fails to materialize. This is the mechanism here, according to my own observation, and probably many of you must have observed this thing. So it is possible to get involved in the illusion, and the practice will make you perfect. And nothing will, even the full involvement in the illusion will not produce any suffering. It will look like suffering, but it will not be suffering. So that is another matter, isn't it? So let us continue. Similarly, all the evils attributed falsely to the Atman by indiscriminating persons who do not make it lose its innate purity by so much as an iota. So the suffering is seen real only because the jiva and the body and the mind and the other people and other the world, they are seen as real. Otherwise, when the unreality is seen, well, the suffering also becomes an unreal event. It does not matter how long it was, it does not matter how intense it was, the suffering and the memory of the suffering, the mental suffering, they both are discarded. This is the purification of the mind. It assumes the nature of Atman. Now, misery or klesha has been defined by Patanjali as that which causes misery to the jiva. This klesha is of 5 kinds, which is avidya, the thinking the body, which is the non-self as the self; asmita, that is regarding the Atman as one with buddhi or mind; raga or attachment; dvesh, the anger which a man feels when his desire to attain a particular object is frustrated; and abhinivesha, that is the fear of death or loss or etc. So here a good comparison has been made with the yoga philosophy by Patanjali. The Patanjali has very systematically, lined up all these things, how many kinds of modifications of the mind are there, how many kinds of miseries are there, how many kinds of states of the mind are there. Well, that is his, very genius. He is, has systematized everything regarding the mind, and then goes ahead and gives a step-by-step solution to everything. Highly recommended. Number 9. Okay, probably we are out of time, but I'm going to finish it. Atman, in regard to its birth, death, going and coming, that is transmigration, and its existing in different bodies, is not dissimilar to the Akash. That is the Ghadakash, or the ether portioned off by a jar. So Shankar says the point which has been just stated is again thus developed. Birth, death of the Atman, as seen in all bodies, is like the creation, destruction, coming, going, and existence of the Ghatakash, or the ether enclosed within a jar. So I hope everybody got this. He's saying, well, it is an illusion. And Anand Giri says, it may be contended that the Jeev after death, as a result of the meritorious deeds alone, done in this life, goes to heaven. If a sinner, he is thrown into hell. After this, his enjoyment of happiness or misery in heaven or hell, he again takes birth. In due course, he departs from this world. This theory of transmigration is inconsistent with that of the non-dual Atman. The text refutes this contention. All these diverse experiences regarding Atman are due to avidya, and therefore not real. Like the ether, Atman, which is pure, undifferentiated, and one, can never be subject to transmigration, which are falsely superimposed upon it through avidya. So something important here, this belief of which, from which many seekers suffer, is the thing that it is the Atman that is taking births. The transmigration or reincarnation is being done by the Atman. And many people will say, well, the reincarnation is a solid fact of the Vedas and Upanishads and all. But look at this, when you read from the source, when you hear it from the horse's mouth, you will see what is written in these scriptures, isn't it? Somebody told them that the reincarnation is real, and you, the Atman, is reincarnating again and again. And that is pure fiction. It is not happening. So reincarnation is not supported by Advaita Vedanta. This is what is Gaudapada is saying here. As far as the birth, death, and coming and going is concerned, the Atma is not dissimilar to the Akash. That is what he is saying, and because he has not, simply stated it that, throw away the theory of reincarnation, it's not valid, it's not true. Instead of that, he has simply stated that, look, is the space within the pot coming and going, taking birth and dying? Is it really happening? And you can see it now. No, it is not happening. It was always the same space. Whatever was projected on this space was ignorance. And so he makes it very clear that No, it does not happen. And similarly, Shankar is very to the point here that these changes, the illusory changes that are seen in the Jeev, are not really present. They are not an attribute of the Atman. It is not being done by the Atman. So on. It never takes birth. It never dies. It does not even exist. And it does not take reincarnation also. Now the funny thing here is that the Jeev is also called Jivatma in some of the texts, some of the scriptures. The Atma is added on to the Jeev. For some reason, I don't know why it happened. It simply muddies the meaning of the Jeev. So it was then shortened into Atma. Not Atman, Atma. And yes, the Jeev takes birth. There is some relative truth in that. If you step down in the ignorance a little bit, 1 or 2 steps down the ignorance, you will find that yes, the Jeev reappears. Because same memory, it is recycling. that is kind of another topic, but that comes under the study of the illusion or study of the Maya. But that's probably, this is my theory that this must have happened like this. Because the Jeev is also called the Jivatma, and people drop the Jeev and pick the Atma. This kind of belief was formed. It is probably it is a misunderstanding of the words only because they sound so similar. Do not confuse Jivatma with Atman, which is a substratum. Jivatman is not Jivatma. Jivatma is an illusion. So the illusion can do whatever it wants to do. You see, we are not concerned too much about it. Let it take incarnations, reincarnations, let it go to hell or heaven. The Atman does not do these things. So, and the Vedanta does not support reincarnation. This can be shocking discovery for many who simply assume things instead of seeing things. So it's already 90 minutes now, so we are going to stop here today and we'll continue the chapter 3 of Mandukya Karika. Thank you very much everyone for listening, commenting, and I'll see you very soon.